When you look at the crossover compact SUV market, there are a few offerings out there, most of them coming to the segment here in the last few years. One notable is behind me. Hey, welcome to this edition of Road Warrior. I'm your host, Grant Roberson. Now, what we have is the 2016 Volkswagen Tiguan, and it kind of brings to the market a different take on what this segment delivers. Looking at the Tiguan name, basically they got that by combining tiger and iguana and pretty much making this vehicle somewhat different from the competition. Now, looking at the profile, what you're gonna notice is a very car-like stance from here down. Up here, very vertical SUV-like. Now that's blending that crossover segment and really is where the industry is headed. Now what you're going to notice is the overall numbers are somewhat compact, and we'll look at those in just a second. Where that translates to is on the inside, a little bit tight when it comes to occupancy numbers, but with this verticalness, it does have somewhat of a cathedral-like feel. Looking at the numbers, you can tell right away that pretty much this is in that compact market. Now overall, it's about 174 inches, wheelbase around about 102. Now the wheels, you can tell, about as pushed back as they can go. Now height's not too squatty, about 6 feet tall, giving you again decent getting in and out of this vehicle, especially for my overall height. Now one number I truly like, which sets this apart from more of a sedan-like feel, is the overall ground clearance, creeping up close to 7 inches. That versus sedan or any other small SUV, that's usually about 1 or 2 inches less than that. So definitely having some capabilities when it comes to snow, because I'm not sure you're going to take this off-road, but it does help in those inclement weather situations. Looking at the corners, first thing you'll notice is a little bit of rubber cladding over the wheel wells, and that's going to help with a little bit of slinging rock or anything that could possibly scrape up this nice paint. Now what you're also going to notice is the wheel choices. Now the standard is going to be 16 or 17 inch, but what we stepped up to here is 19-inch wheels. Now they're wrapped in a nice Pirelli tire, 255 40s. Now this vehicle does come in front-wheel drive or at the as-tested 4Motion. One ease of comfort that every vehicle has to come with is the proximity smart key system. No longer do we fiddle with the key fob. We pretty much want to get to the door and climb inside. Now this vehicle does it quite well. Simply walk up, it senses that you're here and unlocks. Now on the passenger side, it's going to unlock this door and the driver's. Then you'll have to manually unlock this with a button. Now what's even better is the security continues down the vehicle. And what I'm referring to is the fill-up area. Now I talk about this all the time, and fast forward if you don't like it. Now what's great is when the vehicle is locked, this will of course be locked. When it unlocks like that, it simply pops open. Now what you're going to notice here is it is the old school cap system, which I'm a big fan of replacing this with the capless, but pretty much right now, the old standard. With the somewhat compact overall size, somewhat tight numbers on the inside for people, one area that's quite big is the cargo area. Now before we dive inside, one thing to talk about is maybe some features that are missing. You'll notice a few behind the steering wheel, but back here at the back, you're not going to find any what we call the course backup sensors. Instead, it's going to be the standard backup camera, going to give you decent view, but I really like that extra sensory factor because it's really going to alert you of anything in the way. Now what you're also going to see is you're going to have decent glass all the way around. That's probably one reason you don't need the sensors, because you have decent viewing out the back, not too many blind spots. Now diving into the cargo area, what you're going to find is decent space. Now with it open and all the seating in place, you're going to see around about 24 cubic feet. Not too shabby considering the average sedan is almost half that. Now with all the seating laid flat, you're going to easily double that, really giving you tons of cargo options. One feature that works really well with the roof height on this vehicle is it translates here to the rear hatch, really elevating it out of the way, even for my 6-foot+ frame, no banging my head here. Now, when you look on the inside, one thing you really don't want to look past is right here, this tonneau cover. Now, a lot of manufacturers are looking past it, don't see the importance, but what I like is it adds that extra security. Now, this one is particularly a rigid unit. That means you actually have an upper shelf when this is closed, but it also means when you can't use it, it's too much in the way, you really got to find a storage, pretty much put it down here and make it the cargo floor. Now, one thing I like under the cargo floor is even better. That is a full-size spare and some other little niches down here, but that's a nice feature you definitely want to have that, again, some manufacturers aren't putting a lot of effort in. Swinging around to the power plant, one thing that we want to look at is really what lies beneath. Now you'll find it's kind of the old school method, the nice putting it up here. Really would prefer more of a hydraulic lift, but we'll move on. Now what you're going to see down here is typical power for a vehicle this size. specifically a 2.0 liter inline 4-cylinder turbocharged. Now it's going to be both in the front wheel drive and the 4Motion as tested here. Now what does that equate to? Around about 200 horses and 207 foot-pounds of torque. As for 0 to 60, probably over 7 seconds, but let's just not worry about it. What it also delivered is decent fuel economy. Now, lastly is the transmission. Now there is no manual option here, which could possibly give you a little bit more sport. Instead, pretty much coupled with a standard 6-speed automatic transmission. Swinging around to the grille warfare, in this case, the lack thereof. Instead of a huge menacing grille that you see on some of the other contenders, here they've gone with more of a sleek design, sweeping right across the middle. Of course, VW blazing really big in the middle. Now what you're going to see is body color all the way around, even right down to, of course, the lower bumper. Now, instead of lower fascia really adding a little bit more flair, they really angle it back. That could be helpful. Technically, if you go off-road, this gives you a little more clearance than it would if you had some pretty little fascia here. Now you have menacing headlights, really stylized horizontal, sweeping just a little bit around the fenders, lower fog lights. This whole design, really nice and sleek and goes quite well with the rest of the body lines. Climbing inside, first thing you'll notice is the dark appointments all the way around with just a little bit of brushed accents here and there, really combining for an overall sleek look, which I'm pretty much digging. Now, as for legroom numbers, what you're gonna see up front is around about 40 inches. In my opinion, about 1 to 2 inches too short. Now, as for the back seat, that's going to be around about 35 inches, or what I refer to as knee bleeding numbers. Now, unfortunately, with the limited space up front, there is no moving the seats forward to give the back seat occupants any more space. Looking a little bit closer to the seats, first thing you're going to notice is pretty much they're adorned in leather, somewhat soft material, not too rigid and, well, not too plush. What you're also going to see is a little bit of bolstering around the sides. What I found is this makes it somewhat more comfortable versus it feeling too tight. Now, as for operation, the passenger side was truly manual with only the seat back being powered. As for the driver, it's getting fully powered options. One thing you expect is centered right there on the dash, nice oversized touchscreen system, minimal buttons on the side for ease of navigation. Now, one thing you won't see is a central home screen. Instead, you'll just simply use these shortcuts. Another thing you won't find is a navigation system. That just was missing on this particular model. What I also liked was these nice symmetric knobs. This one being for volume, this one being for tune select, really allowing you to dial in your specific station, press the button and set it. Now let's talk about vents. What you see here, right here in the middle alone, is for vents, really allowing you to have great airflow. Even better, they can be articulated in different areas, different ways, allowing the air to really get around the cabin. There's 4 in the middle and 2 on each side for the passenger and driver. Looking lower on the dash, one thing you're going to find is simple operation when it comes to climate. Really 3 symmetric knobs, one for temperature, one for fan speed, and the other for mode. Very minimal buttons up here. What you also find is heated seats right here on both sides for driver and passenger. For a little added storage, one thing you'll find is these niches right here and one up above. That's going to allow you to put your devices. Even better, it fits right here and you can charge it with the USB connector, and you do have an auxiliary jack if you want to go a little bit more old school. Now, to crank this vehicle, don't forget simple start stop here and a good old power supply here if you need it as well. One thing we talked about that's lacking is really a manual option for the transmissions, pretty much straightforward automatic, but of course they have that manual-like feel. Pretty much put it in drive, shift it over, and you can shift on the fly. Even better, there's some nice paddle shifters here on the steering wheel to make it feel a little bit more sporty. Looking between the front seats, you'll see cup holders hidden behind this nice sleek cover, so if you don't want to see that guts in operation, you can pretty much cover it up. Now, as for elbow support, nice high elevation for the center console, and you'll find that this will articulate in case you want different angles for your support. Now, once you open it up, decent camera down here. It's going to hold a few things. Close it up. Going to reset that articulation we mentioned just a second ago. Swinging around to the second row, one thing that's going to help with the legroom I mentioned earlier is the seating back here is somewhat elevated, meaning your knees are going to be in a somewhat decent position, so you're going to have vertical flow that's going to be quite comfortable. Now, one thing you're going to want to know back here is it takes a little bit of strength to maybe manipulate the seating. And what I'm referring to is really the seat back and also the seat cushions. Now, back here is about a 60-40 split, 70-30. It's hard to tell in this bench styling, but what you actually have is a traditional movability with the bottom seat cushion. All you do is you pull up on the handle here, give it a little bit of strength. That's going to allow you to move this back and forth. Now, I'm not sure of the benefits of that, considering the legroom is already a little bit tight, so moving this forward and backward, not a big thing. Lastly is the positioning of your seat back. There is a pull handle here. That's naturally going to tumble this forward. But if you want to have a little bit more reclinability, simply pull on that, ease it back. That's going to give you just a little bit more comfort when you're going down the road. For your backseat drivers, one thing that can help with comfort is really right here through the center. And what I'm referring to is good old elbow support. That's going to come in the fashion of this center divide that comes down, gives you space for 2 cup holders and decent support. Now, one thing about that, you'll notice is this isn't padded. Nice hard plastic. That's because it does translate into the cargo wall when it's being operation. Any other material is really going to not weather real well. Now it does for this edition Road Warrior and a test drive behind the wheel of the 2016 Volkswagen Tiguan. Now what we like is the overall size, not too bad. Goes up with the competition pretty well considering the profile is somewhat different than what you're seeing in the competition. Now as for horsepower, to be expected, small vehicle, small power plant. Also small is somewhat of the interior occupancy, but it wasn't bad. One area that really shined to me was the cargo, really delivering a lot of space in that initial offering. Of course, you can make it bigger by folding those seats in different situations. Now, as always, I'd like to thank you for watching this edition of Road Warrior. Keep both hands on the wheel and eyes straight ahead.